A former Dallas police officer is waiting her sentence after she was found guilty yesterday of shooting and killing her unarmed neighbor last year. CBS News has obtained the booking video of Amber Guyger being processed by Dallas County sheriffs. The 31-year-old claims that she thought she was in her own apartment when she opened fire. Guyger could spend the rest of her life behind bars. Kenneth Craig has the latest.
Former police officer Amber Guyger returned to the Dallas courtroom a day after being found guilty of murdering Botham Jean. This morning, the same jury that convicted her is deciding her sentence. Guyger faces between 5 years to life in prison for the fatal shooting of her 26-year-old neighbor last year. The prosecution called Jean's best friend from college, who called him a natural leader.
I have never lost someone this close in my life. And the feeling is just unexplainable.
On Tuesday, the jury heard from Jean's mother.
It's just been the most terrible time for me.
Allison Jean described the sadness of losing the middle child she raised in a close family in St. Lucia.
It's just been like a roller coaster. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat.
At her trial, 31-year-old Guyger testified she had entered Jean's apartment by mistake, thinking it was her own.
I pulled my gun out and I yelled at him. It's like, "Let me see your hands, let me see your hands."
Prosecutors claim she was distracted with sexually charged text messages to her married police partner and never called for backup.
For her errors, for her omissions, Botham paid the ultimate price.
Attorneys for John's family called the guilty verdict a sign of change in policing culture. Kenneth Craig, CBS News.
Well, Nicole DeBoard is a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, and she joins me now from Houston, Texas. So, Nicole, this was a surprise verdict because those watching the case felt that it would be very, very difficult to prove intent. That's a key that you need to establish murder. Why do you think it is that the jury decided to convict?
Well, I don't think that intent was ever a question. That she admitted that she had intentionally shot him with the intent to kill him. The only confusion was what apartment she was in. So to me, the intent portion of it was never really complicated. The question was whether or not she knew she was in her own apartment.
And the fact that she was able to, that was so much of what she was putting forward, that she wasn't in her own apartment. How do you think it was that they were able to turn that around?
I think that that's been the prosecution's theory this entire time, that, she really was careless as to whether or not she was in her own home or whether she was in some other location. And so the jury should still find that she had the responsibility for murder, and that's what they did.
The prosecution presented text messages from Guyger that also appeared to show a racial bias. One of those texts, a friend tells her that she should adopt a dog, but warned that the dog might be racist. And then Guyger responds, and I'm quoting here, "It's okay, I'm the same." What do you make of that evidence being presented and allowed in?
I think that these are, obviously devastating facts for the defense in this case. And I think that the prosecution is going to do everything they can to try to show that her character is such that she should be treated harshly by this jury. And the defense is going to do everything that they can possibly do to show that these texts don't represent Amber Guyger as a person.
And do you think ultimately, it's easy for us to look back on the case now, but do you think it was a smart move on the defense's part to have Guyger take the stand?
I do, absolutely. I think it was absolutely necessary for her to take the stand. I think that without being able to hear from her personally, this jury could not make any kind of a calculation about how they felt that she acted in terms of her own character. And so I think it was exactly the right thing for this defense team to do.
In Texas, murder carries a punishment anywhere from 5 to 99 years. What do you think the jury has to consider in order to decide what's appropriate here?
The jury will consider her character. They'll consider whether or not she's had prior incidents in her life that reflect poorly on her as a person. They will consider whether or not she's a continuing danger to the public. And they'll consider whether or not she's got remorse.
And remorse matters.
And remorse does matter.
All right, Nicole DeBoard, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.